3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome back to the Seinfeld Chronicles, episode 2. On this episode, we will be talking about season 1, episode 2, the Stakeout. My name is Giorgio Cavaciuti, and I'm the resident Seinfeld expert. So let's get stuck right in. On this episode, it's basically surrounding around Elaine invites Jerry to a friend's birthday party. Jerry meets a girl there. However, even though they get on really well, he never gets any of her details. He can't find her. So he decides to stake out where she works until he bumps into her accidentally. I gotta say, this episode feels a lot more like Seinfeld. It's still not fully there, but it does feel a bit more like it with the presence of Elaine. As soon as you get into the episode, you're like, okay, this is how it's like. This chemistry is what was missing in the last episode to a certain degree. They seem to really focus more on the concept of nothing happening on this one as well, as the start of the episode is about nothing really happens. In the middle, there's nothing really happens, and by the end, Jerry gets the girl, but at the same time, it doesn't really change anything. It's like a minor thing, and this might be really focusing on the joke of Jerry basically going out with a different super attractive woman every single episode. They seem to have really kind of hammered down more about social niceties.
Okay.
You know, we have unwritten laws in the society.
They've also added Jerry's internal monologue for the first time in this episode, which is really interesting because you kind of get to see inside the character. You get to know him a bit more. You get to understand his what his motivations are a bit more, and also it obviously makes for good comedy that he can do this. You can hear his thoughts. You can hear what he's actually thinking. Whatever else, it just adds an extra layer to it. It also shows you this internal monologue that Jerry isn't a good person. He's not like a nice sitcom person, which I found really interesting because, especially considering it's the second episode, you really start to get that these are more not real people, but they're not the usual sitcom archetype, if that makes sense. George and Jerry had a really good scene in this episode where they're waiting in the lobby for the girl that Jerry's interested in, and the chemistry is just really great between both of them. You can really see it starting to develop their characters and what they're like together and stuff like that, and just the back and forth is just so strong. I found there was halfway through this episode that Jerry is talking to his parents, because you meet his parents for the first time in this episode, and they're talking about his relationship with Elaine, and it's just really weird because this it feels kind of an actual conversation in the middle of the episode about how he doesn't him and Elaine just kind of broke up, even though they're good friends, even though it worked out, it just didn't work out. So I thought that was a little bit awkward. It kind of almost felt like they was trying to set up oh, they will get together again eventually, but yeah, I'm not really sure. I didn't think it worked completely, but I mean, it's only the second episode of the show, so maybe they're still just trying to find it. I think that the real purpose of this episode was more to introduce Elaine as a character and her background with the rest of the characters, how she knows Jerry, what's really happening there. And I think it did quite a good job at that, honestly, because you get to know, when they first introduce her, you get to know her as the funny, interesting character. Oh, she has good chemistry with Jerry. Oh, this is going to be a good extra character. And then you quickly understand that oh, there's still a bit of tension between them, still a bit of little awkwardness. And it resolves itself by the end of the episode. So then from there, they can just carry on, hopefully, and not bring it up too much anymore. I don't think this episode is as good as the pilot episode. But I think that's because this episode was really about fleshing out the universe. It was more about trying to get the audience to understand the relationship between Jerry and Elaine. But it was just way too much exposition, really. it felt like there was bits where there were like no laughs almost, like, and in a 20-minute show you can't really like do that in my opinion. I'd still say it's a strong episode. I'd still give it like, well, not strong, an average episode, like a 5 out of 10. Um, because there were parts that were like generally like hilarious. However, yeah, only gets a 5 out of 10. On the Seinfeld meter, I think I'd put it just below the pilot. So number 2 slot. Sorry, not good enough. Hopefully we get a few more challenges later on. However, yeah, that's the end of this episode of the Seinfeld Chronicles. Thank you for watching, and hopefully we're here again next week. Cheers.